Well, thanks for joining us today for our next episode of Mixed Messages with Jeff Bogue. My name is Joe Caruso, and I'll be your host as we dig into today's topic. Well, from news sources to comedians, from friends to advertisements, it seems everyone has an idea of how we should think, live, and make decisions. And when even the experts sound convincing, but they disagree, how can we cut through the noise? How do we sift through all the information overload and choose what should govern our lives? Well, our leadership here at Grace has been processing these things and praying for all of us, so we want to offer a resource to navigate some of the day's most pressing topics and questions. Jeff, I love that you have a little bit of a routine while I go through that intro each and every week.
Yeah.
One of them is you take a look at your phone and you check things because you're not on camera yet.
Yeah.
And you sneak that out, and then about half the time, I can tell out of the corner of my eye, you're giving me some kind of goofy look.
Yeah.
And it's...
I'm like, oh, are you going to tell us how to navigate all the questions? Like,
No, that's your job. That's why it's Mixed Messages with Jeff Bogue.
oh, I see. I was curious to the answer myself.
No, that's why I just do
I
the
also
hosting.
kind of hope that you'll screw it up.
Yeah, I have done it before. I'm surprised I don't have it memorized.
I
be
am
honest. Mm-hmm.
too, Joe. I'm actually deeply disappointed
Yeah.
in you as a person.
Matter of fact, I've had people walk up to me and they basically have it memorized. like that's a little disturbing.
That actually is not healthy.
Yeah,
at all.
they have a tattoo of me with a microphone on their arm. It's weird.
That's bad. That's
Yeah.
bad.
So, well, Jeff, today, this is actually someone walked up to me in the lobby of our church and just kind of gave me a verbal passing question.
Mm-hmm.
So normally I have like a text because they go to that form that we talk about, which is bath.gracechurches.org/mixed messages, and they fill it out and they help us understand what they're thinking, what they're asking. This person says, hey, seriously, can you help me figure out how to navigate aging parents?
Yeah.
It seems like there are a lot of options out there. There's a lot of directions you could go down. There's a lot of mentalities you could have, and it's complicated. Not only situationally, but like relationally.
For sure.
So, Jeff, two reasons we want to ask you this. One, we trust your heart. We trust how God continues to help you give us some clarity and direction as our pastor. But also, you've walked through this personally.
Yep.
And so, help us a little bit. How do we navigate as our parents begin to age?
Yeah, it is a tricky question, and it is a difficult thing. It is a wonderful thing. It can be painful at times, and it is rewarding to the max. And so, it's just one of those things, that's kind of like whatever adjective you threw at it, I'd be like, yep, that one too. You need to go through. So, Heidi and I did navigate this. Specifically with my mom and dad.
Mm-hmm.
So my mom and dad actually did not live long lives. My mom was 69 when she died in her sleep, and my dad was 74 when he passed away. But mom and dad lived a very generous life. They were quick to give, quick to help, quick to bless someone else. And they were very hardworking and very responsible people. And when my dad was 49 years old, 48 or 49, he had his first massive heart attack. And then a few months after that, he had a massive stroke. And that completely changed him. So my dad was he was one of these guys that was brilliant, but not well educated. So my dad could do complex math problems in his head, but he was a little bit dyslexic. So like listening to him read was painful. And my dad was probably old enough. My dad would be well into his 80s if he was still living. That all the helps we have in school and things like that, he didn't have.
Sure.
So, but he was just a brilliant guy. He was a version of a machinist called a pattern maker. And so this is back before computers. My dad would make a cast pattern, think of like a foundry. He would make that pattern, proof that pattern, get it dialed in to the millimeter kind of a thing. And then they would cast steel off of it. So he made truck wheels. So they might they might run 100,000 wheels off of the pattern he created, right? So you would do that stuff on a computer now, but back in the day, that was slide rule and stuff like that. In fact, I have his tools, and I don't know how to use them at all. So, but I keep a lot of them because I have a bunch, and my brother-in-law has a bunch, and we love it. So that was my dad. He's a really, really smart guy. If he could think it in his head, he could build it with his hands. And when he had his stroke, those abilities were taken from him, right? So at that point, my mom, who was a homemaker, they got married when she graduated from high school. She was 17. 10 months later, my oldest brother was born. So that's what she did. We're talking the early 50s. It's kind of the way that it worked. And so she never worked outside the home all those years. Dad was the sole provider. He got sick, couldn't provide. Mom had me at home, so I'm the youngest of 5, and had to put food on my table, basically. And so she went and got a minimum wage job and worked her way up, went to school, retired she got a minimum wage job cooking in a nursing home and retired as the vice president.
Wow.
So just incredible lady, kind of a thing. So they as they got older, Dad had a lot of health problems. Mom had a lot of health problems, congestive heart failure, stuff like that. And then they didn't have a stable financial foundation, right? Sure. So the answer to all of that for Heidi and I was, what if you guys sell your house, which they had lived in long enough that they owned outright, and what if we combined our money and build a house, and you guys could live with us, and we could help you and watch over you, and you'd have the security of that, and be around your grandkids. And so that's what we did. And so their last 5-6 years of their lives, they lived with us. We absolutely loved it. Would do it again in a heartbeat. We miss them. My mom Heidi would say my mom was her best friend. And I adored my father and completely enjoyed my mother. We had a great, great time. When they got here, though, kind of the reality of aging parents set in. So suddenly, I have a lot of doctor's appointments to go to. Mom's heart, and trying to get her into different tests and trials and things like that. Now, my siblings really showed up, and so it wasn't just Heidi and I. It was really the kids worked hard, but like lots and lots of cardiology appointments. Dad had to change doctors, and he had a lot of complexities, and so like all that sets in, and you're like, I guess this is what I'm doing now. I have toddlers at home, and I have parents at home. And I don't feel like I can not watch over either one of them, either one of those groups.
Yeah.
So you felt responsible all the time for both sets of them, and then balancing that. They're adults. Their minds worked, so we did not deal with Alzheimer's and things like that. It was other health issues. So you're like, I'm trying to let you be independent, but this is my house. And so, like, I remember having a conversation with my dad about driving, and Dad had started to have some blackout episodes. And so I talked to him, like, Dad, I don't think you should drive. And not only do I not think you should drive, but, like, I don't want to tell you can't, but kinda, because like all of our finances are intertwined, and if there's an accident, and not only would you feel horrible. So it's all those conversations, and you're having them constantly, and then you're going home and having them with Heidi, the two of you, like, what do we do with Mom and Dad? And then you're trying to get your siblings involved, like, this is what's going on with Mom and Dad, or they're telling you, did you know? And it becomes a major piece of your life.
Sure. It's like, it's something most of us are going to have to look for. Like some of us that are listening, this is exactly where we're at. And you're like, oh my goodness, this is hitting me right between the eyes. And then some of us might be listening, we're like, this seems a long way off. But you kind of have to have this in the back of your head as you
Yep.
kind of get older. It's not something you can generally escape, at least not without some kind of tragedy.
Yeah.
And so we kind of all have to have this in mind. One of the things you said, Jeff, really caught me. You mentioned you kind of have this dual seat where you were kind of caring for your parents and caring for your young children.
Mm-hmm.
It's almost like the seats shift,
That's right.
and so kind of walk us through a little bit of like, what's that like, and maybe how can we navigate it best?
So if you have children, it's a lot like being a parent. And so you're saying you're evaluating what's best for them, what's safe for them, what their health needs are, what their financial needs are, what their insurance and your Medicaid and Medicare and all those kind of things. And when the car breaks, they're going to call you. Just like when my teenage son had a flat tire last night, he's like, "Hey, Dad." I'm like, okay, that's what we're gonna go work on that, And so you're just picking up all of that like you would a child. What's tricky is that they are not children, so you ideally want to do that in a way that they are involved, that they have a voice, etc. So I would say this: if I was given like some principles,
Sure.
I would say this. Number one, with aging parents, I would say give them as much independence as long as possible. I'll have people at church every once in a while and they'll say, "My mom still lives in her house and she's 91 and I worry about her." I'm like, let her stay there. If you're not worried about her falling or she's not struggling with Alzheimer's or something like that, let her do her thing. Because the thing that she's doing is the thing that's keeping her alive.
Sure.
My dad and I, because we built this house, so we kind of finished parts of it. And one of the things I did was I put in this really big, beautiful, actually, paver stone patio, but I did it myself. And my dad helped me. And so we're wet sawing bricks and, things like that. And it was hot out there. And by the way, I was in my early 30s, so I was a different level of a workhorse back then, And my dad was in his 70s, and I remember coming in, and I said to Mom, I keep encouraging Dad to come in and rest, and he won't do it. I'm worried about him. And my mom, it sounded so callous, but our family's kind of like this. She goes, "Oh, let him die out there." I'm like, "What?" And she's like, "Honey, he is so happy, and he is so happy creating, and he's so happy being with you. Let him do his thing." And I was like, "You know what, Mom? Good advice. He can do it. He wants to do it. Nobody's in danger. Like the car's a different conversation. This is me and Dad in the backyard. I'm loving it because I'm just hanging out doing stuff with my dad." And so he did, and he survived just fine, So independence as long as possible. The second thing I would say is involve them in every decision that they can be involved with. So like that conversation with my dad about the car, I never took the car keys from him, never once. I treated him like an adult. I talked to him as his adult son, and I'm like, "Dad, let's think this through. And Dad, you're blacking out. And that if you hurt somebody, Dad, he'd be horrified if he ever felt responsible for something like that." So we walked it through, never took the car keys, never took the car. He decided that himself. The third thing I would say then is, like, remember, if you have two parents and they're married, remember your mom and dad have a marriage. So my mom and dad then made decisions about Dad driving. It wasn't my place to come in and say, "This is my house, you're going to do what I tell you to." It wasn't that at all. And so they would talk. And sometimes if we were doing something medical or something like that, I would, or my brother or my sisters, all of us adult kids would interact with them and like, well, they're a family. I left them.
Right.
So Mom and Dad were a family, and they still had the ability to think that stuff through. The fourth thing I would say is look for every place to give dignity. So my mom and dad paid me rent. I'm air quoting if you're listening to this. Paid me rent. I didn't need rent, and it wasn't enough to cover hardly anything, but it gave them dignity.
Yep.
Like my father especially, the idea that he would take from his children was just something he could not bear. In fact, my dad, some of his very last words to me, I wrote them down. He looked at me, he said, "Are we fair and square?"
Wow.
Right? So it meant that to him. Like my dad would give you anything and would hesitate to take anything from you. And like him, in my mind, I love doing this. In my dad's mind, he's like, I don't want to be a mooch.
Yep.
Right? So we involved a little bit of money because it just gave them dignity, and it made the way that we built the house, if you went that route, it made it feel like it was their home that they were renting, right? And I think that was another thing, maybe a fifth thing, like if you got to that, trying to have designated spaces, like our kids who saw their grandparents every day, which was amazing, but they weren't allowed just to barge into Grammy's and Poppy's home. Like
Sure.
that's their home,
Yep.
and I didn't either. I would kind of walk in, but I'd knock. Mom, it's me. Is it okay? Yeah, come on in. But like we're like, no, they have dignity, they have value, and that stuff is important to them. So I think those 5 things are important. I think what happens is when your parents get weak, and especially if they get weak mentally, it becomes more complicated. So when my dad died first, and when he got weak physically, I still tried to involve him, and I would say, Dad, the way that things went with him is he couldn't eat. And so I'm like, Dad, do you want a feeding tube? No. Well, Dad, they want to put you in a nursing home for rehab. I don't want to go to a nursing home. Please don't do that. And I don't want to guilt trip anybody, we had the ability to not do that because of our living arrangements. So we tried to honor those things. My dad became bedridden, and so you're talking now changing, feeding, medicines. And he was a dignified man, and so he actually didn't want my mother to do that. Really did not want my sisters to do that. Like it would have embarrassed him. Not
Sure.
My sisters are amazing, but it's just the way Dad was. Like that's
Yeah.
So I did it mostly. My brother did it. My mom did too. And then at the end, we got nurses and stuff in, but. Like I'd just pick him up and take him in the shower, and so, but I was trying to preserve, because I was so little when Dad got sick, he was used to me helping him, and I was used to that.
Yeah.
So that wasn't this weird part of our relationship. So you're just looking for things like that to go about it. I would say a big one, guys, is don't guilt trip yourself. Sometimes what's best is for your parents to be in a nursing home. When you start dealing with dementia and Alzheimer's and things like that, and they are not safe. When one parent is caring for the other, and Dad can't lift mom can't stop Dad, like. Don't be ashamed that you use, in essence, a medical system, because you can go there every day and they can go visit. And sometimes, honestly, especially with Alzheimer's and things like that, if the person who's sick is in a facility, it relieves the stress off of the caregiver, especially if they're older, and it actually creates a vibrant relationship again. Because this person is dying under the weight of caring for the other one. So I just don't think be ashamed of those things. Don't be afraid of hospice. in-home hospice was one of the biggest blessings we had. And you have to interview hospice and things like that. Hospice does not mean you're dying next week. It means that there is not a path to recovery. My dad was in home hospice for probably 4 or 5 weeks, and it really helped because it opened up government and insurance money, hospital beds, oxygen, nurses. And what happened when we got hospice involved, you get quick responses to medicines and things like that. You're not going to doctor's appointments anymore. The family got to be a family, and the medical providers got to be a medical provider. So stuff like that. I would say in all of it, Heidi was incredible. My brother and my sisters, Heidi and I were not in this alone. You know, the family rallied, and we all bore the burden. Heidi and I bore it uniquely because it was our home. But I thought I was proud of my siblings and how we handled it all. So we just kind of tackled it, you know. And I would say if you're listening, you know, your story is unique. Your parents are unique. Don't make your parents old before they're old. If they are vibrant and relatively healthy and can be independent, let them do their thing, baby. I mean, leave them alone. Because I have a friend. He's 82. He rides a bike miles and miles and miles. His kids are like, he's going to kill himself on that bike. And I'm like, or keep himself alive. I mean, if he can do it and wants to do it, let him do it, you know. And then if he's got to transition down to a 3-wheel one or something, like, you know, you can do all kind of stuff. But let them do what they can do while they can do it.
Yeah. My this is grandmother, but my wife's grandmother won a statewide volunteering award at 89.
Yeah.
You know, she was just so active and helping in the community that, you know, it was recognized at that level. So, and she lived till her mid-90s, you know, and it was part of what kept her alive and gave her purpose and helped her out. Now, Jeff, what's neat about all the things that you said is you see that stuff play out scripturally.
Yep.
You know, all the way back with God's first written down covenant with the Israelites, you know, honor your father and mother was one of the 10 commandments. And then all the way through, you know, love and the family and how you treat your parents and 1 Timothy
5:8. But if anyone does not provide for his relatives, and especially the members of his household, he has denied the faith and is worse than an unbeliever. You know, so there was a while there where Heidi and I were taking care of my mom and dad and her grandma. And you're not serving at the church a lot, you know, but we looked and said, well, that specifically says that we're supposed to care for our household first. 1 Timothy 5:4. But if a widow has children or grandchildren, let them first learn to show godliness to their own household and to make some return to their parents, for this is pleasing in the sight of the Lord. And on and on and on. So the scripture is super clear. We're supposed to take care of our family.
Yep.
There is not a prescription or a directive as to exactly what that means.
Yep.
So that might mean going over and mowing their grass and checking on them because they're independent. That might mean living in a house together because we had the financial ability to do it. Mm-hmm. Mom and dad own their house outright, you know. That might mean a nursing home. It can mean all kinds of things.
So the last little angle I'd like us to briefly talk through, there are lots of resources to help general relationships like the one I'm going to talk about, but I'm wondering if our relationship with our parents is complicated.
Yep.
If there's a hard past, maybe something was blown up, someone drove a huge wedge in between the family, or you even kind of in passing mentioned the idea of like, seems like my parents just want to mooch off me.
Yeah.
Something like that. Is there any generic help, I don't mean generic in a bad way, but just general help that you want to help those families as they navigate these difficult scenarios?
Do your best. and seek wise counsel. So I think actually what you're talking about is might be the rule instead of the exception, unfortunately. And Dad walked away years ago, and now he's showing up in your life because there's nobody to call. And ironically, maybe, or sadly, I watched that because of my mom's brothers. My mother grew up in a horrible home, and both of her brothers died of alcoholism. And I watched, like, they called Mom. There was nobody to call.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, well, so I think you have to navigate it carefully. I think the directive to care for them is still there. I don't think it's a license for them to be abusive. I don't think it's a license for them to use you. I don't think it's a license for them to cause more harm or destruction in your family. And that's where you need wisdom and counsel. There might be an argument for you specifically that says, I just should not be involved. Or maybe I'm paying for care so that Dad has a place to live, but I'm not the one providing. There's 1,000, there's a million different scenarios. So I think for the Christ follower, the directive is, I need to be involved. The wisdom is, what does that mean? What is the proximity of that, etc.
Yeah. Well, that's really helpful, and I think you're right. I think that there's a lot of people that struggle with that, but have a longing or at least a wish that they could do it the way that you discussed, trying to figure out how to do it.
Yep.
So,
and guys, I would say this, like, if you have a healthy family, even if you don't, you're going to look yourself in the mirror.
Yeah.
Right? And honor your father and mother. There's a real sense that when I look in the mirror, I'm answering that question about myself. Did I show up? Did I engage? Did I do my best? And it's hard because 53 weeks to the day after my dad died, my mom died. And she died in her sleep. We knew she was sick, but no warning, so to say. So I'm cleaning the house out, and my siblings and I are doing the legal work, and we're figuring out, and I'm like, ideally, parents die before children do.
Yeah.
And you're going to be there and looking yourself in the mirror and saying, Dad was cruel, I wasn't. Mom was neglectful, I wasn't. I honored the Lord. I showed my children something, which is what my parents did. My parents grew up in horrible homes, and they cared for their parents because of Christ. And so we had an example, and it came back to bless them, So that stuff's hard, but a lot of things in our faith are. Mm-hmm. I can tell you on the other side, there is a reward, and it may not be a great relationship, but it is I honored the Lord. I honor my mother and father as unto the Lord. Mm-hmm. And I honored the Lord. He used me in this way. And maybe my children saw me do that. And it affected their relationship with me.
That's really helpful. Well, if this is the type of thing that you need help with, you can always reach out to us. Or if you have follow-up questions or different questions that you're just wrestling with, seems like there's so many of those mixed messages out there, you can always submit those questions at bath.gracechurches.org/mixed messages, and we'd love to get that in as soon as we can. If we can help you take any unique next steps, or maybe we can be a part of that counsel that helps you navigate a complicated relationship, we'd love to do that. Reach out to us, let us know. And if you would like more of what you're hearing on this podcast, make sure you subscribe, follow, and rate and review it. If you need a church home, we'd love if you would join us on the weekend here at Grace, or even if you're out of the Akron area, you can begin exploring things online. Well, thank you very much for jumping in with us today as we continue to seek God's voice through all the mixed messages around us. Catch you next time.